The alarm screamed through the corridors of the patrol ship. Red lights flashed in every direction as crew members rushed to their stations. Captain Taemin stood on the bridge, his dark eyes fixed on the main screen. His fingers drummed once against the armrest of his command chair before he went completely still. "Report," he said quietly. Lieutenant Jiwoo's hands flew across her console. Her face was tight with concentration as data streamed past her eyes. "Distress signal detected, Captain. Civilian transport vessel. They're broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Distance, 12,000 kilometers. They're dead in space." Taemin leaned forward. "Life signs." Jiwoo's fingers stopped moving. She looked up at him. 200 signatures, sir. All human. Most of them are families. I'm reading 43 children under the age of 12. The bridge went silent. Every human crew member stopped what they were doing for just a moment. It was barely a second, but it was there. A collective breath. Held and released. Commander Velthar rose from his station. The reptilian officer's scales caught the red emergency lights as he moved closer to the captain's chair. His species, the Kraven, were known throughout the galaxy for their logical minds and strategic thinking. He had served in the coalition forces for 20 years. He had seen many situations like this. "Captain, protocol requires we wait for reinforcements in hostage scenarios," Velthar said. His voice was calm and measured. "The nearest battle group is 90 minutes away." Taemin didn't look away from the screen. "What's the transport status?" Pilot Hyun-soo spoke up from his station. "Life support is failing, Captain. Their oxygen recyclers are damaged. They have maybe 3 hours of breathable air left." He paused. "Maybe less. Who has them?" Taemin asked. Jiwoo pulled up the scan data. "Torvik raiders, sir. I count 3 ships attached to the transport's hull. They've latched on with boarding clamps." She enhanced the image on the main screen. "They're not just stopping them. They're preparing to board." Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. The Torvik were slavers. They took prisoners and sold them to the highest bidder. Once those raiders got inside that transport, those 200 people would disappear into the black market of the outer colonies. "Captain," Velthar said more firmly, "the Torvik will kill the hostages if we approach. Standard tactics require we establish a perimeter and negotiate." Taemin finally turned to look at his second-in-command. "Commander, how many successful negotiations have been recorded with Torvik raiders?" Velthar's inner eyelid blinked. It was a sign of discomfort in his species. "The success rate is approximately 38%. And in the failed negotiations, what happens to the hostages?" Velthar said nothing. Taemin stood up from his chair. "Jiwoo, what's our weapon status?" "All systems ready, Captain. Plasma cannons charged, missile tubes loaded." "Hyun-soo, can you get us close?" The pilot turned in his seat. A grin spread across his face. "How close?" "Sir, close enough that I can see what they had for breakfast." Hyun-soo's grin widened. "Yes, sir. Though it might get bumpy." Velthar moved to block Taemin's view of the screen. "Captain, I must protest. What you are suggesting violates multiple coalition combat regulations. A close-range approach will endanger this vessel and every person on board." "You're right," Taemin said quietly. "It will endanger us. All of us." He gestured toward the transport ship on the screen. "But they're already in danger. Those families didn't ask to be attacked. They didn't volunteer for this. We did. When we put on these uniforms, we accepted the risk. They didn't. That is an emotional argument." Velthar countered. "Logic dictates we preserve our combat effectiveness for the greater good." "Then I guess humans aren't very logical," Taemin said. He raised his voice so the entire bridge could hear him. "Listen up, everyone. We're going in. Hyun-soo, plot a micro-jump. I want us between those raiders and the transport in the next 3 minutes. A micro-jump at this range?" Velthar's scales stood up along his spine. "That's suicide. The calculation error margin is too high." "Then I guess Hyun-soo better not make any errors," Taemin said. He turned to Ji-woo. Prepare a precision strike. Target those boarding clamps. The second we drop out of jump, I want them severed. Clean shots only. If you hit that transport, those families die. Ji-woo's jaw was set. Understood, sir. I won't miss. Ensign Da-un. Taemin called toward the engineering station. I need you to do something crazy. The young engineer looked up. Redirect all shield power to our port side. Everything. I want maximum protection, facing that civilian transport. Da-un's eyes went wide. Sir, that will leave our starboard side completely exposed. I know. The raiders will target that side. I'm counting on it. Velthar grabbed Taemin's arm. For a moment, the two officers stood facing each other. Captain, you are deliberately making your ship a target. You are sacrificing tactical advantage. Your crew could die. Taemin gently removed Velthar's hand from his arm. Commander, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Velthar stared at the human captain. In his 20 years of service, he had served under 12 different commanding officers from 6 different species. He had never met anyone who thought like this. It went against everything he had been taught about warfare and survival. But something in Taemin's eyes made him step back. Coordinates locked, Hyun-soo announced. Jump calculated. Will appear 52 meters from the raider cluster. Weapons locked on boarding clamps, Ji-woo confirmed. Shields redirected, Da-un said. Port side at 200%. Starboard side at 0. Taemin sat back down in his command chair. All hands, brace for combat jump. Hyun-soo, execute on my mark. He took one breath. Mark. The ship lurched. Space folded around them. For a single heartbeat. Reality twisted inside out. Then they were there, hanging in space barely 50 meters from 3 Torvik raider ships and 1 helpless civilian transport. And all hell broke loose. The Torvik ships reacted instantly. Weapons fire lit up the space between the vessels before anyone could even speak. Plasma bolts screamed toward the patrol ship from 3 different angles. Shields holding, Da-un shouted over the noise of impact alarms. Port side deflecting everything they've got. Fire, Taemin ordered. Ji-woo's fingers moved with surgical precision. 4 beams of concentrated energy lanced out from their ship. Each one found its target. The boarding clamps connecting the raider ships to the civilian transport exploded in small bursts of molten metal. Direct hits, Ji-woo reported. Clamp severed. Transport is free. Hyun-soo, get us between them and that transport, Taemin commanded. The pilot's hands danced across his controls. The ship spun on its axis with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for a vessel of its size. Within seconds, they had positioned themselves as a shield between the raiders and the civilian ship. More weapons fire hammered their shields. The bridge lights flickered. Port shields down to 60%. Da-un called out. They're concentrating fire. Velthar watched from his station in something close to shock. Everything about this situation was wrong, according to his training. They were outnumbered. They were in a vulnerable position. They had made themselves a target. Yet somehow, it was working. The transport was drifting away from the raiders, moving toward open space. Then the lead raider ship changed its target. Captain, Ji-woo's voice went sharp. The flagship is turning. They're targeting the transport. On the main screen, everyone could see it happening. The largest Torvik vessel was rotating its weapons arrays away from the patrol ship, toward the helpless civilian transport. They're arming plasma torpedoes, Ji-woo said. Her voice was steady but tight. Impact in 30 seconds. Can you hit them? Taemin asked. Not in time. Their shields are still up. I need at least 40 seconds to burn through. Hyun-soo, Taemin said quietly. Already on it. And sir. The pilot didn't wait for orders. His fingers moved faster than thought. The patrol ship lurched forward, engines screaming as they pushed past safety limits. They were accelerating directly toward the path of the incoming torpedoes. Velthar finally understood what was about to happen. No, no, you cannot. But Hyun-soo could. The patrol ship swung into the path of the plasma torpedoes at the last possible second. The projectiles, meant to destroy the civilian transport, slammed into the starboard side of Taemin's vessel instead, the side with no shields. The explosion threw everyone on the bridge sideways. Sparks erupted from multiple consoles. Smoke filled the air. The lights went completely dark for 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in. When Taemin pulled himself back into his chair, blood was running down the side of his face from a cut above his eye. He wiped it away with the back of his hand. Damage report. Damage report. Daeun's voice came through coughing. Starboard hull breached on decks 4 and 5. Emergency bulkheads sealed. We've got fires in 3 sections. Life support is stable, but weapons are down to 40% capacity. The transport? Taemin asked. Hyun-soo checked his console. Clear and moving away. They're safe. Velthar stood up from where he had been thrown to the floor. His scales were smoking in several places where console fragments had hit him. He stared at the captain with an expression his face had never made before. You deliberately took fire meant for them. You sacrificed this ship. You endangered every person on board. His voice rose, something Kraven rarely did. For strangers, for people you do not even know. Taemin looked at him. They're not strangers, Commander. They're ours. What does that mean? Velthar demanded. Your species? Your genetic relatives? What calculation justifies this action? It means they're people, Jiwoo said from her station. She was holding her arm, which hung at an odd angle, but her voice was strong. It means, when someone needs help, we help. It's not complicated. It is illogical. Velthar insisted. Maybe, Taemin admitted. He stood up, swaying slightly. But it's human. In our culture, we have a saying. A society is measured by how it protects its most vulnerable. Those are families on that transport, Commander. Parents. Children. People who just wanted to start a new life on a colony world. We don't calculate acceptable losses when it comes to our own. Velthar looked around the bridge. Every human crew member was injured to some degree. Their ship was damaged. Their weapons were barely functional. They had risked everything for people they had never met. His mind couldn't process it. 20 years of military training told him this was wrong, inefficient, wasteful. A commander's duty was to preserve combat assets for future battles. You saved who you could save with minimal risk. You accepted that, sometimes, losses were necessary, but he looked at the faces around him. Not one person seemed to regret what they had done. Sir, Hyun-soo called out. The raiders are breaking off. They're leaving the system. Sir, everyone turned to the screen. It was true. The 3 Torvik ships were turning away, accelerating toward the jump point. They were retreating. Why? Velthar asked. We are damaged. They could destroy us now. Taemin sat back down in his chair. Because they realize something. Commander. They realize we won't stop. Even if they destroy us, even if they kill every person on this bridge, we won't let them have that transport. They'd have to go through our wreckage to get to those families. And they know that if they do, the next human ship that shows up will do exactly the same thing. And the next one, after that. That is insane, Velthar said. No. Taemin corrected gently. That's the point. We're not insane. We're committed. There's a difference. The raiders are criminals, but they're not stupid. They know when the cost is too high. We just showed them that the cost of attacking human civilians is always too high. The communication console beeped. Captain, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the civilian transport. They're requesting permission to speak with you. 18-2. Put them through. A man's face appeared on the screen. He was middle-aged, with tears running down his face. Captain. This is Jae Hyun. I'm one of the colonists. We just wanted to say. His voice broke. We watched what you did. We saw your ship take that hit. For us. For people you don't even know. I don't know how to thank you. Taemin smiled, despite the blood still dripping from his forehead. No thanks necessary. Just get to New Busan safely. Start your new lives. That's thanks enough. We will, Jae-hyun promised. We will. And we'll tell everyone what you did here today. Everyone will know. The transmission ended. Velthar stood in the center of the damaged bridge, surrounded by injured humans who were already getting back to work repairing their stations. Despite their wounds, despite the damage to their ship, they were calm, focused. Not one of them questioned what had happened. For the first time in his life, Commander Velthar began to wonder if perhaps there was something his species had forgotten. Something about what it meant to be worth saving in the first place. The Coalition reinforcement fleet arrived exactly 90 minutes after the first distress call, just as Velthar had predicted. By then, the battle was over. The Torvik raiders were gone, the civilian transport was safe, and Captain Taemin's patrol ship looked like it had been through a war. Admiral Cretan's flagship was an impressive sight. The massive vessel dwarfed the damaged patrol ship as it approached. The admiral himself was even more impressive. His species, the Avik, resembled large birds with brilliant blue and gold feathers. He had commanded coalition forces for 30 years and was known for his strict adherence to military protocol. He did not look pleased. 2 hours later, Taemin stood in the admiral's conference room. His head wound had been treated by Dr. Minseo, the ship's medical officer, but the bandage was still visible above his eye. Around the table sat various coalition officers, including Commander Velthar. Admiral Cretan's feathers were ruffled, a sign of agitation in his species. Captain Taemin, I have reviewed the tactical data from your engagement. Do you understand why you are here? No. Yes, sir, Taemin replied calmly. Then please explain to this tribunal why you violated no less than 7 coalition combat regulations in the span of 15 minutes. Taemin stood straight. The regulations you mention are designed for military engagements between armed forces, sir. This was a civilian rescue operation. A civilian rescue operation that you conducted without authorization, without backup, and without following established hostage negotiation protocols. The admiral's beak clicked sharply. You performed an unauthorized micro-jump in a combat zone. Do you know how many ships have been destroyed attempting such maneuvers? I do, sir. 43 vessels over the past decade, and yet you attempted it anyway. With your entire crew at risk. The alternative was allowing 200 civilians to suffocate or be taken by slavers, sir. I made the choice I felt was necessary. Ominous. A Kraven officer spoke up from the side of the table. Captain, by placing your vessel between the raiders and the transport, you deliberately made yourself a target. You then proceeded to sacrifice your ship's defensive capabilities to protect non-military personnel. By what tactical logic can you justify this? Taemin looked at the officer. I can't justify it by tactical logic, Commander. I justify it by moral imperative. Those people needed help. We were there. That's all the logic I needed. The room erupted in multiple alien languages. Officers spoke over each other, citing regulations and tactical doctrine. Velthar sat silently, watching Taemin face the tribunal, with the same calm he had shown during the battle. Admiral Cretan raised one wing for silence. The room quieted. Captain, I understand. Humans are relatively new to the coalition. Perhaps you do not fully understand how we conduct military operations. With respect, sir, I understand perfectly. I also understand that sometimes regulations need to be set aside for what's right. Right? The admiral's head tilted. And who determines what is right? You? Every captain in the fleet could make that argument. Chaos would follow. Sir. A new voice spoke up. Dr. Minseo had entered the room. Permission to speak? Admiral Cretan nodded. Granted. Minseo held up a datapad. I have the casualty report from the civilian transport. 0 deaths. 17 minor injuries, mostly bruises and cuts. The colonists are being transferred to a medical station now, but they will all recover fully. That is fortunate, the Admiral said. But it does not change the fact that protocols were violated. Sir, there's something else. Mincio tapped her datapad. We recovered the raiders' communication logs. They had lied about the transport's life support situation. The oxygen wasn't going to last 3 hours. It was failing much faster. The civilians had 47 minutes of breathable air remaining when Captain Taemin engaged. The room went silent. 47 minutes, Mincio repeated. The reinforcement fleet arrived 90 minutes after the distress call. If Captain Taemin had followed protocol and waited for backup, every single person on that transport would have died. All 200 of them, including 43 children. Admiral Creton's feathers settled slightly. He looked at Taemin with different eyes. You could not have known this when you made your decision. End quote. No, sir. But I knew that waiting might cost lives. So I acted. The door to the conference room opened again. A human man entered, wearing civilian clothes. It was Jae-hyun, from the transport. He was accompanied by several other colonists, including a woman holding a small child. Admiral Creton, Jae-hyun said respectfully. I apologize for interrupting. But I heard Captain Taemin was being questioned, and I felt you should hear from those he saved. The Admiral gestured for him to speak. My name is Jae-hyun. I'm a diplomat, actually. I was relocating to New Busan with my family and others from our colony group. When the raiders attacked, we thought we were dead. We knew the reputation of the Torvik. We knew what they do to prisoners. His voice shook slightly. Then your ship appeared. We watched through the viewports as you positioned yourself between us and them. We saw you take weapons fire meant for our transport. We watched your ship get torn apart, protecting people you had never met. The woman holding the child stepped forward. My daughter is 3 years old, Admiral. Because of Captain Taemin and his crew, she will grow up. She will go to school. She will have a life. How many regulations is that worth? Admiral Creton was quiet for a long moment, his head turned toward Velthar. Commander, you were present during the engagement. What is your assessment? Velthar stood. He had thought about this question for hours, ever since the battle ended. Admiral, by every tactical measure I have been trained to use, Captain Taemin's actions were reckless. He endangered his ship. He put his crew at risk. He violated protocols that exist for good reasons. Taemin's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes dimmed slightly. However, Velthar continued, I have also concluded that perhaps our tactical measures are incomplete. The captain saved 200 lives at great risk to himself and his crew. Not one person under his command questioned his orders. They followed him without hesitation, knowing they might die. That speaks to a kind of leadership I do not fully understand, but I recognize its value. He turned to face Taemin directly. I spent 20 years learning that the purpose of military force is to preserve assets and win conflicts. In one afternoon, humans taught me that the purpose of military force is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I am not certain which philosophy is correct, Admiral, but I know which one makes me feel that my service means something. The room was completely silent now. Admiral Creton stood from his seat. His feathers smoothed down completely. Captain Taemin, your actions violated coalition protocol. This is fact. You endangered yourself and your crew. This is also fact. By our standard regulations, I should relieve you of command. Taemin stood straight. I understand, sir. However, the Admiral continued, I am reminded that the coalition exists to protect the people of its member worlds. Not military assets. Not ships. People. You protected people, Captain. 200 of them. He looked around the room. I hereby issue a formal reprimand to be placed in Captain Taemin's record, but no demotion, no removal from command. As the officers filed out, Admiral Cretan approached Taemin privately. Captain, between us, I want you to know something. You humans operate by different rules than the rest of us. Perhaps the Coalition needs that. Perhaps we have become too focused on protocols and forgotten why we created them in the first place. Taemin saluted. Thank you, sir. After everyone left, Velthar remained. He approached Taemin. Captain, I owe you an apology. I questioned your judgment during the battle. Taemin smiled. You were doing your job, Commander. Don't apologize for that. Still, I wonder if I have been wrong about many things. Velthar looked uncertain, an expression foreign to his species. How do humans live with such risk? How do you accept that protecting others might cost everything? Taemin put a hand on Velthar's shoulder. Because, Commander, if we don't protect others, then what are we worth protecting ourselves? 3 weeks passed. The patrol ship, now fully repaired, returned to duty along the border regions. During those 3 weeks, something unexpected happened throughout the galaxy. News of the rescue spread. Colonists on the transport had recorded footage of the battle. They shared it across every communication network they could access. Within days, billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched a human patrol ship deliberately take weapons fire meant for civilians. They watched it position itself as a shield. They saw humans risk everything for strangers. The reaction was mixed. Some species praised the action as heroic. Others called it recklessly emotional. But everyone was talking about it. Humans were building a reputation, one that made some coalition members nervous. Captain Wonshik commanded another human vessel 2 sectors away. He had received multiple messages from other human commanders discussing the incident. There was pride in their words, but also concern. If enemies learned that humans would sacrifice anything to protect civilians, that weakness could be exploited. The concern proved justified faster than anyone expected. An emergency transmission came through to Coalition headquarters. A mining station in the Kovash system was experiencing a critical reactor failure. The facility housed 800 workers from a dozen different species. Radiation levels were rising fast. They had 6 hours to evacuate everyone before the reactor went critical. Captain Wonshik immediately volunteered his ship to assist. So did 4 other human vessels in range. Within an hour, they were en route to Kovash. Then, the second transmission arrived. The Torvik raiders had returned. This time they brought a fleet. 15 ships now blockaded the Kovash system. No one could get in or out. And they had a demand. Their message broadcast across all Coalition channels. The face that appeared on screens across the fleet belonged to a new Torvik commander, the brother of the raider captain, whose ship was destroyed 3 weeks ago. Coalition forces, hear me. The mining station will explode in hours. 800 lives hang in the balance. We will allow rescue ships to approach on one condition. You will surrender the human captain responsible for the death of my brother. Captain Taemin will be turned over to us for justice. If you refuse, we maintain the blockade. Everyone on that station dies. The transmission ended. Within the hour, Ambassador Revax arrived at the Coalition Command Center. He was a senior Kraven diplomat, known for his logical approach to conflicts. He immediately called for a meeting with the human commanders. The solution is clear, Ambassador Revax stated. 1 life for 800 lives. Captain Taemin must be surrendered. Captain Wonshik stood across the table from him. Absolutely not. Be logical, Captain. 800 beings will die if we do nothing. Your Captain Taemin took risks. He violated protocols. This is the consequence of his actions. The consequence of his actions is that 200 people are alive, Wonshik countered. We don't trade our people. Not to raiders. Not to anyone. Even if it means 800 others die? Even then, the ambassador's scales flickered with confusion. That is illogical. You would let 800 beings perish to protect one? We're not protecting one, Wonshik said firmly. We're protecting a principle. The moment we trade Captain Taemin to save others, we tell every raider in the galaxy that threatening civilians is effective. We make every human a target. No. We find another way. Rupra. We. There is no other way, the ambassador insisted. The Torvik fleet is too large. Even if you attack, you cannot break through before the reactor explodes. Wanshik pulled up a star map. Then we fight anyway. I'm calling every human ship in range. We're going in. That is suicide. Maybe. But it's our suicide to choose. Word spread quickly. Within hours, human ships from 3 sectors began converging on Kovash. Not just military vessels. Civilian transport captains diverted course. Private security ships joined up. Even a human merchant vessel carrying medical supplies changed direction toward the blockade. The coalition leadership watched in alarm. They called emergency sessions. This could spark a war with the entire Torvik Confederacy. One rescue operation was threatening galactic stability. Aboard the repaired patrol ship, Captain Taemin received the news about the blockade and the demand. He immediately sent a message to Coalition Command, volunteering to surrender himself. The response came from Captain Wanshik personally. Absolutely not. Taemin. Stand down. We're handling this. Wanshik. 800 people will die. Not if we have anything to say about it. Stay at your post. That's an order from a fellow captain. Commander Velthar stood on the bridge of Taemin's ship, watching his captain pace. The human's frustration was visible. Captain, perhaps the ambassador is correct. The logical choice is clear. Taemin stopped pacing. There's nothing logical about giving humans to slavers, Commander, but the mathematics are simple. 1 versus 800. Math doesn't account for everything, Velthar. If I surrender, yes, those 800 might be saved today. But what about tomorrow? What about the next time raiders grab civilians and demand we hand over our people? Where does it end? When finally raiders. Velthar was silent. He had been thinking about this question for 3 weeks, ever since the first rescue. His entire worldview was being challenged by these humans, and their refusal to accept cold calculation as the final answer. Lieutenant Jiwoo spoke up from her station. Sir, I'm receiving a private message. It's marked for Commander Velthar. Velthar looked surprised. From whom? Ambassador Revax, sir. He's requesting you join him at Coalition headquarters. Hours later, Velthar stood before the ambassador in a private chamber. The older Kraven looked at him with concern. Commander, I requested this meeting because you are one of the few Kraven serving directly under human command. I need you to help me understand something. Commander, I need you to help me understand something. I will try, Ambassador. Why? Why are humans willing to sacrifice everything for people they do not know? Why do they refuse simple solutions that would save more lives? I have studied their culture extensively, but I cannot comprehend this behavior. Velthar was quiet for a long moment. Ambassador, I have asked myself the same questions. I have concluded that we are asking the wrong things. Explain. We ask why humans risk so much. The better question is why we risk so little. We ask why they refuse to calculate losses. The better question is why we are so comfortable with those calculations. Velthar's voice was steady. 3 weeks ago, I watched a human captain take weapons fire meant for civilians. I called it illogical. But those civilians lived. And when they looked at that captain afterward, do you know what I saw in their eyes? What? Hope? Ambassador. They looked at him with complete trust that someone would always come to save them. That they mattered. Can you say the same for our people? If a Kraven civilian were in danger, would they have that same hope? Ambassador Revax sat back. You have been with them too long, Commander. You are thinking like a human now. Perhaps, Velthar agreed. Or perhaps I am finally thinking clearly. He stood straighter. Ambassador, I came here to tell you something. I am resigning my commission in the Kraven military, effective immediately. What? I am requesting a permanent transfer to human command. I wish to serve with Captain Taemin's crew. Why would you do this? You are throwing away a distinguished career. Velthar walked toward the door, then paused. Because I have spent 3 weeks watching humans. They do not abandon their people. Not one. Not ever. If I am to serve in this galaxy, I want to serve among those who believe some things are worth more than survival. He left the ambassador sitting alone, considering those words. Outside, Velthar sent a message to Captain Oneshik. Sir, this is Commander Velthar. I am no longer bound by coalition protocols. I am requesting permission to join the fleet heading to Kovash. I may have an idea. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Kovash system exactly 4 hours after the Torvik blockade was established. 7 warships, 3 civilian transports, and 1 medical vessel, against 15 Torvik raiders, heavily armed and positioned in a defensive sphere around the mining station. Captain Oneshik stood on his bridge, studying the tactical display. The odds were not good. Even if they could break through, the time it would take meant the reactor would likely explode before they could evacuate everyone. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission. It's Commander Velthar. He's requesting permission to join the fleet and to address the Torvik directly. Oneshik raised an eyebrow. The Kraven officer from Taemin's ship? What's he doing here? He says he has a plan, sir. Put him through. Velthar's face appeared on the screen. He was no longer wearing his coalition uniform. Instead, he wore simple civilian clothes, but his bearing was military. Captain Oneshik, I am requesting permission to speak to the raiders on an open channel, one that all ships in this system can hear. Why? Because I have learned something from humans. Sometimes the right words matter more than weapons. Trust me, Captain. Oneshik studied the Kraven's face for a moment. Something had changed in Velthar's eyes. There was a certainty there that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. All right, Commander. You've got your open channel. Velthar's transmission broadcast across every ship in the system. His voice was cold and steady, carrying the kind of authority that came from decades of military service. Attention, Torvik Fleet. I am Commander Velthar of the Kraven Dominion, now serving with the human forces. I address you not as an enemy, but as someone who wishes to prevent you from making a fatal mistake. The Torvik commander's face appeared on every screen. He was larger than his deceased brother, with more scars across his insectoid features. A Kraven serving humans. How far you have fallen. State your purpose, or die with them. My purpose is to warn you, Velthar continued, his voice never wavering. You believe threatening human civilians gives you leverage. You believe you can force humans to choose between their principles and innocent lives. You are wrong. You have not gained hostages. You have signed your death warrant. The Torvik commander laughed, a clicking sound that echoed across the channel. Your human friends are outnumbered. They cannot break through our blockade before the station explodes. They have no choice but to surrender their captain to us. You misunderstand, Velthar said. You think this is a negotiation. It is not. Let me tell you what I have learned in 3 weeks among humans. I watched them deliberately take weapons fire meant for civilians. I saw them damage their own ship rather than let strangers come to harm. I witnessed them face a tribunal and accept punishment rather than apologize for saving lives. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humans do not negotiate when their people are threatened. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not surrender. You have not trapped 150 humans on that station. You have given 650 other beings the privilege of being protected by human principles. And you have given this fleet a reason to show you what happens to those who dare endanger human civilians. The Torvik commander's laughter died. You're bluffing. You cannot win this fight. Winning is not the point. Velthar replied. I have learned that lesson too. The point is that every human ship in this fleet will fight until they cannot fight anymore. They will sacrifice themselves if necessary, Not because they are stupid, not because they are reckless, but because they believe that some things are worth dying for, and protecting innocent beings is at the top of that list. Then they will die, the Torvik commander snarled. Yes, Velthar agreed. Many will die, but so will you. And here is what you need to understand. After your fleet destroys these ships, more human vessels will come, and more after that. You have attacked a human colony ship. You have threatened human civilians on a mining station. You have made humans your enemy. That is not a battle you can win, because humans do not stop. They do not forgive. They do not forget. You could kill every human in this fleet, and it would only make the next fleet more determined. The channel was silent for a moment. You have a choice, Velthar finished. Leave now, and face no consequences. Or fight, and discover that humans meant every word I just said. Choose wisely. The Torvik commander cut his transmission without responding. Captain Wanshik looked at his tactical officer. All ships. Prepare for engagement. They're not backing down. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the Torvik ships broke formation. It turned away from the blockade and accelerated toward the system's edge. Then, another. Then, 3 more. Sir, the tactical officer reported. 5 raider ships are leaving the system. Wait, 7 now. Wanshik leaned forward. What about their flagship? The massive Torvik command ship held position for another 30 seconds. Then, it, too, began to turn. All hostile vessels are departing, the tactical officer confirmed. The blockade is broken. The human fleet wasted no time. Transport ships rushed toward the mining station. Within an hour, evacuation began. Shuttles moved back and forth in a careful dance, pulling workers off the station as radiation levels climbed. Captain Tae-min arrived in his repaired patrol ship just as the evacuation reached its peak. He immediately contacted Wanshik. Status? We're getting everyone out, Tae-min. But it's going to be close. The reactor is destabilizing faster than projected. How many are left on the station? About 60. We need 10 more minutes. The reactor won't last 10 minutes. Tae-min looked at his crew. Pilot Hyun-soo was already grinning. Lieutenant Ji-woo was checking her weapons status. Ensign Da-eun was rerouting power to shields. They all knew what their captain was thinking. Hyun-soo, get us close to that station. Da-eun, I need shields over the evacuation shuttles. If that reactor goes critical, I want those shuttles protected. What about us, sir? Da-eun asked. Then we'll be having a very bad day. But those 60 people won't. They positioned their ship between the station and the evacuation shuttles. The reactor was visible now, glowing with dangerous energy through the station's hull. It was going to explode. The only question was when. Last shuttle launching, Wanshik reported. All personnel evacuated. Clear the area, Tae-min ordered. Everyone jump out, now. Captain, you're still in the blast radius, Wanshik protested. I know. Move your fleet to safety. That's an order from a fellow captain. Hyun-soo kept their position steady. The reactor's glow intensified. It was seconds away from critical failure. Then Commander Velthar's voice came through. Captain Tae-min, this is Velthar. I am aboard one of the evacuation shuttles. I wanted to say that it has been an honor serving with you. You taught me what it means to stand for something. The honor was mine, Commander, Tae-min replied. The reactor exploded. The force of the blast was enormous. It tore the mining station apart and sent a wave of energy in all directions. Tae-min's ship took the full force of it. Every system overloaded. The bridge went dark, but the evacuation shuttles, protected by the patrol ship's shields, survived the blast and jumped away to safety. When the debris cleared, Captain Wanshik scanned for survivors. His sensor officer shook his head. Sir, I'm not reading anything. The explosion was too powerful. We need. Then, weakly, a signal emerged from the wreckage. It was a distress beacon. Life signs detected, the sensor officer said, surprised. Hull breach on every deck, but the emergency core is intact. They're alive. Rescue ships rush to the damaged patrol vessel. When they finally cut through the twisted metal to reach the bridge, they found Captain Taemin and his crew battered but alive. The ship had taken damage that should have killed everyone aboard. But somehow, through skill and luck, they had survived. 6 months later, the coalition held a special assembly. Every member world sent representatives. The topic was a proposed change to coalition military doctrine. The new protocols, informally called the Human Standard, established civilian protection as the highest priority in any military engagement, regardless of cost. Ships would be required to risk themselves to save non-combatants. Commanders who failed to protect civilians would face severe consequences. The vote was unanimous. Admiral Cretan addressed the assembly after the vote. Today we adopt principles that one species brought to our coalition. Humans showed us something we had forgotten. That civilization is not measured by military might or technological advancement. It is measured by who we choose to protect and what we are willing to risk to protect them. Commander Velthar stood beside Captain Taemin on the bridge of a new ship, the Unbreakable Promise. It was larger than the previous patrol vessel, with better weapons and stronger shields. The crew was mixed now, humans and aliens serving together under human command doctrine. Captain, Velthar said quietly, do you ever regret what you did? The risks you took? Taemin looked at the stars ahead of them. Every day, Commander. Every day I think about how things could have gone wrong, how my crew could have died, how the civilians might not have made it. He turned to look at Velthar, but then I remember their faces. The colonists, the miners, the families, all alive because we didn't calculate acceptable losses. I understand now, Velthar said. Humans are not fearless. You feel fear, like any species. The difference is, you act despite that fear. You choose to protect others, even when it costs everything. That's what makes us human, Taemin agreed. The communications officer interrupted. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. Civilian colony under attack. They're requesting immediate assistance. Taemin didn't hesitate. Hyunsu, set course, maximum speed. Yes, sir. Velthar watched as the crew moved with practiced efficiency. No one questioned the order. No one calculated the odds. They simply acted because someone needed help. This was what it meant to serve among humans. This was what it meant to stand for something greater than yourself. Velthar had found his purpose among beings who refused to accept that any life was expendable. As the ship jumped to faster than light speed, racing toward another crisis, Velthar stood straighter. He wore a human uniform now, with pride, because he had learned the most important lesson of all. Civilization was not about who was strongest or smartest or most advanced. It was about who you protected when protecting them cost everything. And humans had shown the entire galaxy what that truly meant.